Hey everyone, and welcome to After Hours. Tonight we're going to be in our third episode of the Flamenco Panel by Northcott. In tonight's episode, we are going to be diving into the Stitch in the Ditch quilting, along with taking a look and seeing if we actually want to go with the first original design ideas that we came up with in episode 1. So let's head over to the machine and take a look. Here on the quilt, I've went ahead and finished up the rest of the Stitch in the Ditch from last week's episode. So I did all the borders first to keep the quilt as square as I possibly could, using channel locks, both horizontal and vertical, to keep everything nice and straight. Went ahead and went in with all of that Stitch in the Ditch for my borders. Now, keeping order of quilting, the next thing that I'm going to do is start working on the rest of the Stitch in the Ditch. Since I already have that micro quilter thread in, keeps me from switching threads as much. So I'm going to work around each one of these flower leaf pieces, and then just kind of as we go through the quilt, I'll be doing all of this applique portion first, and then I'm going to go do the background. So I've got my machine, I've got a ruler base on, and I'm going to be using my applique helper because it gives me a little bit more control when I want to work with applique and Stitch in the Ditch. So I've got my machine set at 14 stitches per inch, just like we did for the Stitch in the Ditch, and I'm going to come to wherever I want to start up, and I'm going to pick up my thread. And because I'm tying and burying, I'm leaving plenty of tail. And then I'll start with my needle in the down position, just like that. And then I'll take my applique helper and I'll place it on my foot. Now, this applique helper was made for a little bit of a larger foot than the one that I have on my Innova M24 right now, but it helps me still steer and gives me a little bit more control as I use the grips in it to kind of put my thumb in. So then I'll start my machine up. And this just kind of helps me guide that around my Stitch in the Ditch. Now, Stitch in the Ditch is a slow and steady process. You can go as fast or as slow as you want, but having that extra set of hands on my applique helper allows me to really control where this is going. I'm going to pause when I get into a point so I know everything is perfectly straight with that, and then I'll continue on. Applying a little bit of pressure to my applique helper to press it down. And I'll work around this section. Again, it's a slow and steady process. As I work around this section. And once you get really comfortable with your Stitch in the Ditch, then you'll be able to go a little bit faster in the process. But having that extra set of hands on that applique helper really helps. So we're working our way around this piece. Taking our time as we go. So here at the end, we went ahead and pulled up our threads again, and this is going to give you a quick lesson in tying and burying your threads. So I have two separate pieces of my thread. I've got my top and my bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and tie those into a knot, slowly pull them down to the surface, and then I take both sides of that thread and just kind of slowly rock it back and forth, giving it a gentle tug, not a big tug, especially when you're using a thinner thread like micro quilter. It can pop really easily if you give it a big tug. So rock it back and forth, and that kind of nestles it down into the quilt. Give it another knot just to be safe. Rock that back and forth into the quilt. And then I go ahead and do both pieces at one time. So where I started and where I ended, just so I only have to get the needle out once. Rock it down into the fabric, so it needs a little bit more of a rock. There we go. And then once more, tie it into a knot, rock it back and forth until you'll kind of hear that knot pop underneath. Set that to the side, and then I use the John James Easy Needles, Easy Threading Needles. They have a kind of a notch in the top, and you can just pop both that top and bottom thread through, and now it's a threaded needle. You'll take that threaded piece, go into the hole where you tied the knot, travel underneath the quilt top, and then you will pull it out somewhere further onto another section. So you'll pull that whole section out, and then because it has an open top, it comes out a little easier, so just be careful with that. Give it another pull, hold it nice and taut, and trim at the surface. And that's going to be a tie and bury, so we'll do that one more time. We'll pop that needle on. It's on there. We'll pop into the start and end point. Make sure you're staying just underneath the quilt top, because it is a needle, it can go all the way through, so remember that. You'll pull that off to the side, give it a nice little tug, give it a little scratch, and it's like it was never there, just like that. Okay, so I've done stitch in the ditch around everything that has come into my path of quilting. I've rolled the quilt, and I'm just continuing on with that stitch in the ditch. So we're getting down to the part where we're going to start working around this flower petal section. So I'm kind of started the outside. Around the outside here, I used an arch template to just kind of continue on from one part of these stems to the next. But around here, I'm going to kind of eyeball my stitch in the ditch. I've got one of my handles really close to the fabric, so I can rest my arm on the actual quilt itself, which helps give me more stability and control. And then I've got my left hand right here kind of maneuvering the fabric if I need to shift it just a little bit to hit the exact point that I need. Again, we're starting in the needle down position. Got this at 14 stitches per inch like we've been doing. And I'm just slowly moving that machine and eyeballing that stitch in the ditch right on the outside. And once I get to a point where I need to, then I travel up the next section. Now, if you want to do this with a straight line ruler, that would help as well. The primary pieces of this outside are all straight lines, as opposed to out here they're curvy. You could get away with having a straight line template. So you'll just set that where you want it. Travel there, pause the machine, and turn the template. Let's go about that angle. There, pause the machine, and turn. So you could do this one relatively fast, and you'll get to the point where you don't have to pause the machine, but it doesn't hurt to have it stop in that needle down position, just to make sure you're exactly where you want it to be whenever you're rotating this. And that's going to get you a nice smooth line, or you can eyeball it like I was doing earlier. Whatever works easier for you. You'll find sometimes that doing stitch in the ditch without rulers or templates is easier for you, depending on what project you're working on. So I encourage you to try both ways and figure out which one you like more. But just like we learned with the other portions with the flower and the stems, take your time with stitch in the ditch. There's no rush to get through it. All right, rolling up here to the end. Just taking our time nice and slow, kind of maneuvering that template along. I have grip dots on the bottom of this template. I went ahead and flipped the template upside down so they wouldn't be gripping to anything, because I wanted to easily move this around back and forth quickly. And those grip dots might have stopped me from doing that, performing their purpose. So we're going to pull up our thread here. And then we'll finish off the rest of the stitch in the ditch in the path, which is going to be the veins and the rest of the leaves and the vines. And then from that point, we're going to roll back up, and then we'll start working on the actual flower pieces themselves and go from there. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I started the stitch in the ditch on the inside portion here of the flower petal like we had discussed throughout the previous episodes. And I didn't like it. It didn't hit the way that it should have. I've done that shadowing technique a bajillion times, but on a printed panel, it just didn't hit the way that I wanted it to. And so I decided, well, let's reverse sew, basically. Let's pick it out, which is never fun, because I got about halfway through it and I just realized it wasn't it. So we're going back to the drawing board. So one of the benefits here of doing this, so being able to switch designs on as you go is just kind of part of the process too. When you see something, you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I still did the stitch in the ditch on the outside. I like the puff of it. I think you can tell that on the screen. It gives really nice dimension and layering to it. But I still wanted to do something a little bit different within the actual design itself. So I'm going to come in with a figure 8 here. And then I'm going to come up and do like a little curly Q, maybe just a little point to kind of mimic what's going on within the panel itself. Give it a little bit of a vein even to open it up. And then go that direction with that one. It's harder to do this upside down, but I got that. There we go. And then come back this direction, just to give it a little bit more interest as opposed to just that shadowing stitch in the ditch. It just didn't hit the way that I had intended it to. I did switch to the First Kiss color, so the same color that we're going to be using in the sashing, the 1.5 inch sashing. I switched to that color of Glide for this, so it's going to pop a little bit more. I'm still interested in seeing if we could get away with the stitch in the ditch technique here, doing it with the First Kiss color. Since it's a good blush blender throughout the process, that might be a cool separation between this and that. We'll figure that out when we get there. So I already have that thread in the machine. Let me set my little design space off to the side, and then let's grab our machine. Adjusted tension just a little bit because we went from micro quilter to 40 weight glide. Pull up my bobbin thread, make sure I have plenty of top and bobbin. I'm going to start with my needle in the down position. And then we're going to see how this looks. So we're going to start with our figure 8. And move my thread out of the way since I'm tying and burying. They have to kind of move with it. So good figure 8 so far. And then we're going to come in and just point it. And point. Oh my gosh, I love it. You never really know until you do it though, how it's going to turn out. One of the benefits of practicing and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Like I said, I've done that shadowing technique 1,000 times, but I guess doing it on a printed panel or this one even, maybe just because the colors work different, it just didn't work in my favor this time, and that's okay. But this one sure does. Going up and down. So it's going to go this direction. Oh my gosh. So much better and so much faster. Let me tell you. All right, so let's pull up our threads. I'm actually going to leave the top of the flower not have anything in it. That little top portion, I'm going to leave that open. I think it just gives a little bit of interest and makes you look at it a little longer for that. Pull those, and then I would tie and bury those as I went. So I'm going to set those off to the side. Maybe. There we go. And then I'm going to come over and work on this portion right here. So this is the one that I said maybe we can get away with doing just the stitch in the ditch. But because we just did this way, I really think I need to do the same thing here. So I'll start here. Pull up my thread, start in the down position, and this one will just be one teardrop, up, curly Q. I might travel up this. Let me think, now I gotta think about this. I'm gonna go here, give that a texture dot, come back. Here, texture dot, come back. Texture dot, come back. Doing a little bit of stitch in the ditch per se, free motion wise. Texture dot, come back. Here, texture dot, come back. And then for this one, I came down and down. Let's see how that looked. Oh, so much better. I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. So, being able to switch your designs on the go is some of the fun stuff about freehand. You really get to play around and see what do you really want to do with it. You can also mark out with a marking pencil kind of the exact design that you want to go with, and while you're doing that you could say, oh, maybe that isn't what I really wanted to go with initially for this design. So I've got that one right there. The last one that I have to finish is this one right here. So we're going to do that same idea. We'll start right here. And then we will start it with your first little teardrop. So we're going to do our teardrop first. There. And then we went up, did the little banger, came down, slowly worked our way up the ditch. And then we came out, did a little texture dot, down, slowly worked your way up a little bit, texture dot, down, slowly up, texture dot, down, working your way up, slowly down, texture dot, texture dot, texture dot, down just a hair, and then we came up and back down. Pull up our thread, take another single stitch to pull up the thread once more so we can trim our bobbin. Come through all of those, da-ba-da-ba-da, and trim. Oh, that looks so much better. What do y'all think? I like that so much more. As it fits within that section, gives a little bit more dimension, a little bit of a different look to it, makes it pop a little bit more, and it kept us from having to do stitch in the ditch within every single one of those pieces. So I would complete all of those around. So order of quilting has changed a little bit. You're going to do all your stitch in the ditch around the outside of the flower leaf sections, all the way around, and then that center medallion. And then we came in and we're going to do all of the first kiss color work in here. And then you could do your background quilting first after that if you wanted to, or you could wait till the end to do your background quilting, which is probably what I'm going to do. So just like with the little flower pieces that we had at the end of the vines, I've decided to change this design up too, as opposed to what we saw in the first episode. So I'm actually going to take my ultimate marking pencil so you can actually see it on the quilt as opposed to drawing it on the sheet protector. But I did start here to come up with the idea that I wanted to do in this section. So we have that stitch in the ditch around the outside, little yellow and little tips of the orange petals. But I wanted to leave the yellow ones blank to just give a little bit of dimension in the background. And then we're going to do everything else with the 3 different levels of orange reds that we have here. So our starting position for this design is going to be right here, kind of the bottom of one of these orange ones at its intersection. And we're going to do some loops and some curves and some arcs to keep it moving fast, but to go with the overall flow that we had in the original flower piece up top that we decided to change up as we went. So we're going to start here, and I'm going to come up with a loop right there. And in the smaller orange section, it's just going to get a teardrop, because remember, this is just something that's rotated around and stacked. So we really only see this top portion of one of these larger petals, which is just one of those teardrops. So to keep it continuous from that point, you're just going to come up with a quick teardrop and drop right back down. And then you're doing the same thing as you go around. So we're doing a loop with a drop, and then this is just a teardrop. Loop with a drop. Just get my base there. There we go. Loop, teardrop. Loop, teardrop. Loop, teardrop. Loop with a drop and a teardrop. So you're doing that all the way around this portion. We're going to get here, give ourselves one last teardrop, and now we have to work on the stuff that goes on in the center. So we started and stopped right here. Now we're going to arc our way in to the middle portion, and then arc our way out of that. Arc our way in and out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. We're doing that all the way around this section. In, out. We're going to go in, and before we have to finish our last out, let's come in and give this the swirl on the inside. So we're going to swirl this in, swirl it out to where we came in, and then finish back where we started. So we're starting and stopping in the exact same spot all the way around this section. So let me set all of our tools off to the side that we don't need. I will come over with my thread. We have the first kiss still in here from when we just did the flower petals earlier. Pull at my thread. Give myself a little bit of a start and stop, because since we're tying and burying, I'm just going to set those off to the side. And we're starting up with that loop teardrop. So we're coming off to the right. Down. This is just going to be a straight teardrop. And then we have a loop, teardrop, loop, teardrop. I'm going to pause right there momentarily. I'm going to move my threads and then get back to it. A loop, teardrop, loop, move my threads again, and teardrop right there. So that's our outer sections. Now we need to work on coming into the inner portions, and these are just going to be arcs. So arc to the center, out, center, out, center, out, center, out. Right here, before we have to come up to do our last one, come in and do your swirl. And out again. Just like that. I love the secondary design that you get from the arcs. It looks like another flower is stacked on top of the other ones. Gives it a little bit of dimension, a little bit of movement, lays it down nicely. It's got some good poof to it as well in that section. So I will pull up my thread. Leave myself plenty to tie and bury it, and then trim away. Just like that. So I'll tie and bury those, and then you would continue on through your portion with the rest of whatever you need to use for blush, and then we're going to move on to the next thing after that. Wasn't that just so much fun? I think it's amazing that you can easily change between your designs on the fly and not have to stick with the exact thing you decided with when you first started. I'll see you next week as we take a look at the 4th and final episode in the Flamenco Panel series. Bye!